I never told my son about my $48,000 monthly salary. When he invited me to meet my daughter-in-law's wealthy family, I pretended to be poor, just to see who they really were. But the moment I walked in, they looked down on me. They had no idea who I truly was. Chapter 1. The envelope I never sent. I never told my son how much I earned, not once in 32 years. When he was young, I let him believe we were barely getting by. He thought my job as a contract technician meant wrench turning and scrap work. In reality, I was the silent backbone behind 3 energy patents, with a quiet consulting retainer from an international conglomerate that paid me $48,000 a month, post-tax. But I never lived like it. No mansion. No Tesla. No ego. Just me, a second-hand pickup, a rusted mailbox, and a ranch house that creaked when the wind hit right. It wasn't humility. It was caution. You see, the money never impressed me. People's behavior did. And the moment people knew what I had, they started treating me like a resource, not a person. That's why, when my son Derek called me after 5 long months of silence, I answered with my usual calm, "Hey, kiddo. Long time." "Yeah, Dad. Sorry I've been busy. Listen, I wanted to ask a favor." I smiled. There it was. The old rhythm. "Sure. What's up?" "My fiancé's parents are flying in next week. They're, pretty wealthy. Real estate developers. We're doing dinner at her place. I told them you might swing by." "Might?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Well," he hesitated. I said, "Sure, why not? I just want things to go smoothly." "They're kind of particular." That word sat in my ear like a splinter. "Particular, huh? About what?" "Just it's complicated. Look, can you maybe wear something decent? Like not your garage jacket. And maybe don't mention your job. Just say you're semi-retired or something." There it was. Not an invitation. A containment strategy. I laughed softly. Not angry. Not hurt. Just certain. "Sure, Derek," I said, glancing at the envelope sitting on my desk. Addressed to him. Unopened for 3 years. "Whatever you need." I placed the envelope in my drawer. I'd send it later. Maybe. Chapter 2. The dinner table test. I arrived early. Not because I was eager, but because I wanted to see who opened the door. The house was huge. A faux colonial nestled in a private gated enclave outside Dallas. Tall hedges. Sculpted lawn. Marble lions flanking the porch. I parked my rusted F-152 houses down and walked the rest of the way. When I rang the bell, a woman in pearls and heels opened the door with the expression of someone bracing for a storm. "Yes?" she asked, eyes scanning me up and down. "I'm Derek's father." A pause. One beat too long. You're early." "Yes, ma'am. That's how I was raised." She forced a smile, then stepped aside as if my presence might stain the doorframe. Inside, the living room glowed with chandeliers and hushed tension. Derek's fiancée Monica greeted me with a professional nod. No hug. No warmth. "My parents are formal," she whispered. "Just don't take it personally." I didn't. What struck me more was Derek's face when he walked in. Relief, not joy, washed over him, like he dodged a bullet by seeing me in a clean shirt. We sat down for dinner. Long mahogany table, silver cutlery, napkin rings shaped like swans. Across from me sat William Hamilton, her father, a man who looked like he carried stocks in his back pocket and wore judgment like a wristwatch. He didn't ask what I did. He didn't ask where I was from. He asked, "So, how do you feel about your son marrying into the Hamilton family?" I sipped my water. "Well, I don't know much about your family, Mr. Hamilton, but I know my son. And if he chose Monica, then I'm sure he has his reasons." He leaned back. "We've worked very hard to maintain a certain standard. Our daughter is accustomed to a particular lifestyle." "And what standard is that?" I asked gently. One where appearances matter. The room chilled. Derek shifted in his seat. Monica kicked him under the table. "I see," I said, folding my napkin. "Well, Mr. Hamilton, you and I may live in different worlds, but we both love our kids. That's what matters." He chuckled without humor. "Let's hope that's enough." Dinner ended without dessert. But what they didn't know was that I'd already bought the company that managed their mortgage. I closed the deal 2 weeks earlier, under a shell corporation. The boardroom ambush hadn't even begun. Chapter 3: The quiet acquisition. While they critiqued my clothes and questioned my worth, I was quietly buying the world beneath their feet. 2 months before that awkward dinner, I had lunch with a man named Charles Mayweather, the retiring founder of Hamilton Venture Holdings' primary lender, a discreet finance firm that held controlling debt over several Hamilton family assets, including their consulting firm, their warehouse leases, and even their daughter's luxury startup. Charles liked me. We shared bourbon, talked about ethics, and on a napkin he said, "You know, Derek's future in-laws owe more than they think. A little pressure, and they'd fold." I didn't reply. But a week later, I signed the deal. 3 shell companies. 5 LLCs. No trace. I acquired their family trust's $18 million debt portfolio, a dormant voting block in Hamilton Consulting's board, 2 intellectual property rights held in Monica's wellness brand, all of it. For less than a third of what I'd made over my last decade abroad. Why? Because revenge doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like paperwork. While they mocked my old boots at the dinner table, I was preparing a financial chokehold so quiet it wouldn't even echo. And the most beautiful part? Derek had no idea either. I wasn't doing this to win his approval. I was doing it to protect him from being consumed by a family that saw him as a step down. 2 days after the dinner, I made my first move. I called an emergency shareholders meeting at Hamilton Consulting. I owned just enough leverage to call it, but not enough to control the outcome. Yet. I needed to observe how William Hamilton would respond when faced with a ghost in his own boardroom. Chapter 4. The boardroom ambush. The Hamilton family held their board meetings in a high-rise on the 39th floor overlooking downtown Dallas. All glass, all power moves. They weren't expecting me. When I stepped through those double oak doors, silence fell. William Hamilton's smirk vanished mid-sentence. Monica seated beside him stiffened. Even Derek blinked twice like his brain was short-circuiting. I calmly took the empty chair at the far end of the table. The one marked for non-executive observers. "I believe I have the floor," I said. "According to your bylaws, Section 4.2, any Class B debt holder with more than 18% leveraged interest has the right to observe and issue emergency resolutions for vote. Shall we proceed?" William turned pale. Because he knew exactly what I was holding. His debt. His company's leash. His legacy's rope. I introduced 3 motions. Restructuring their primary revenue stream. Placing a pause on dividend withdrawals. Effectively cutting off personal income. Auditing Monica's luxury wellness startup, which had used company IP collateral to secure investor funds. Triggering an SEC red flag. Initiating a merger conversation with a silent buyer, one of my other shell firms. It wasn't just a power play. It was a rescue mission. They had built their empire on borrowed elegance. And I had quietly bought the sand beneath it. Derek watched it all unfold with a mixture of awe and confusion. He didn't speak, but he didn't stop me either. That told me enough. As I left the meeting, I paused beside Monica. "Next time you laugh at a man's jacket, ask who paid for the building you're laughing in." She said nothing. But her hand clenched the table so hard, her diamond ring left a scratch in the polished wood. Final chapter. The dinner at our house. 3 weeks later, I invited everyone to dinner. At our home. Not the crumbling rental Monica once mocked. Not the polished hotel where they staged their condescension. But the 6-acre estate outside Austin. The one I'd quietly purchased under a trust in Derek's name. Derek arrived first, still processing everything that had unfolded. He carried a bottle of red wine and an apology. "I didn't know, Dad. About them. About you." I nodded. No anger remained in me. Just a quiet satisfaction that he was finally seeing things clearly. Next came William, Monica, and her parents, overdressed and visibly confused by the grand iron gates, the manicured driveway, the valet who greeted them with, "Welcome to the Carmichael residence." They stepped inside like they were entering a museum. Their eyes flicking over oil paintings, arched ceilings, a grand piano Monica once said didn't suit a poor man's fingers. Dinner was served on the terrace, candle-lit, overlooking the rolling hills. And then came the moment. I raised my glass. "Monica, William, I want to thank you for everything. For underestimating me. For laughing at my coat. For showing me who you were, and who I never want around my granddaughter again." Monica flinched. William tried to speak, but I continued. "You see, this home, this company, this entire legacy I'm handing to Derek, was built quietly. Without applause. Without greed. The dinner you mocked me at, it taught me one thing. Silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. Now, if you'll excuse yourselves after dessert, I've arranged for your driver. Because this house, it's for family. Real family." As they left, stunned and silent, Derek stood beside me, no longer ashamed. "You really did all this?" I smiled. "For you. For your daughter. For the legacy they tried to rewrite." Epilogue. The Quiet Empire. They never spoke of that night again. Not William. Not Monica. Not her parents. They couldn't. Because to speak of it would mean admitting they had been fooled by a man they dismissed as invisible. But silence suited me just fine. Because while they scrambled for social relevance, I continued to build in silence. The oil subsidiary I acquired in Monica's father's name, it tripled in value a year later. And I quietly sold it to his largest competitor. The dinner table where I was mocked, now replaced by one where my granddaughter drew crayon empires on white linen, laughing freely, never scolded, never made to feel small. Derek. He took over as junior director of the company I built, learning humility the hard way, but earning my trust again. Sometimes we'd sit on the back porch at sunset, him holding his daughter, both watching the cattle graze in the golden light. "Dad, why didn't you just tell them who you were?" I'd smile, every time. "Because son, it's not who you are when you walk in the room. It's who they become when they think you're no one." That lesson, that power of being underestimated, became the cornerstone of what we built together. A quiet empire. One rooted not in revenge, but in legacy. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Or should the storm have raged harder? Drop your verdict below.